It was something that you see on TV. They, roll them out and the surgical team's walking alongside us. They take us down to the basement, to the surgical center. One of the transplant doctors says to me, "You heard, right? It's a pediatric," which is ideal for another pediatric, which is very, very sad, but it is the ideal match. I donated my eggs 26 years ago when I was 26 years old. We've just found each other. It's fun. So now there's 5 biological children, and I just became a grandmother, or I'll say Glam-Ma.
Dear Family is a podcast hosted by Rachel Steinman, a writer, an educator, and a mental health advocate. And Rachel gets us up close and personal, so we feel a strong connection, familiarity, and comfort with her guests. So settle in and join us as we search for true healing and journey with Rachel and her most interesting guests.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Dear Family, the podcast. If you're listening to this when it has published in the month of May, I want to wish all of the wonderful mothers, surrogate mothers, aunties, Grammies, Glam-Mas, which we're going to find out about that term, Glam-Mas, and really anyone that acts motherly and gives a ton of love. Happy Mother's Day. It's also Mental Health Awareness Month. That's what May is, and we're shining a light on our mental health advocacy. We want to rid that shame and that stigma and replace it with all the love and compassion that you so deserve, and so do your loved ones. Thank you so much for listening and subscribing to this podcast, and for following me on all the social media platforms. That's Right Now Rachel, right with a W. Take care, everyone, and thanks for listening. Chrissy Blumenthal grew up in Arvada, Colorado. She describes her childhood as pretty normal and uneventful until her parents divorced when she was 9 years old. Her mother struggled to make ends meet and tried to provide the best she could for Chrissy and her older brother Gary. After high school, Chrissy took on a number of odd jobs to support herself, including a stint in mud wrestling. At age 20, she gave birth to her first son, Cody, and shortly after his birth, she put herself through art school, earning an associate's degree in the music business. After graduation, she moved to Los Angeles with her then 2-year-old son, Cody, and she began her professional career at Columbia Pictures. She was a single mother for 12 years until she met and married her best friend, a successful film producer and writer, Jason Blumenthal, in 1999. Together, they had 2 kids, Jax and Calli. Life felt like a fairy tale until the summer of 2013, when her world came to a screeching halt. 4 words forever changed her life. Your child has cancer. Jax was just 11 years old when he received the devastating diagnosis. Her son had stage 3 hepatoblastoma, cancer of the liver. Chrissy immediately jumped into the most important role of her life: caretaker, healer, medical advocate, and research fanatic. After a very long, turbulent, and uncertain road that included a liver transplant, lung resections, and chemotherapy, Jax is finally cancer-free. During their journey, Chrissy became passionate about raising funds and awareness for pediatric cancer research, which is profoundly underfunded by the government. She now serves as president at Chords to Cure, a nonprofit centered around live music events which benefit pediatric cancer research. Chrissy currently lives in Brentwood, California with her husband, 2 teenagers, 2 dogs, and a French lop bunny. During COVID, Chrissy was thrilled to get a message that she had been waiting for over 2 decades to receive. It was from the mother of Chrissy's biological children, who were conceived via IVF with the eggs Chrissy donated 27 years earlier. The pregnancy resulted in twins who have now grown into an awesome young man and wonderful young lady. And her family has welcomed them all into their homes and into their hearts. The family continues to grow because her firstborn son, Cody, recently had an adorable baby girl named Arrow, officially making Chrissy a proud Glam-Ma. Welcome, Chrissy. I'm so happy to have you on the Dear Family podcast.
Thank you, Rachel. I'm honored to be here.
Chrissy, you and I met through a mutual friend, Lauren Rajani. And pre-pandemic, I was invited to a crafting party at your house for Valentine's Day. We decorated mason jars and we wrote love letters. I loved that you did this. I love the crafting spirit in you. The kindergarten teacher in me really appreciated that. We need to do more things that are fun. You've got a very fun, happy spirit.
Thank you.
Chrissy, because this is a podcast called Dear Family, can you tell us a little bit about your family?
I live in Los Angeles with my husband, Jason, and we've been married 21 years. I had a son prior to marrying Jason, who was 12 at the time we got married. His name is Cody. He's 34 now. Jason and I then had 2 beautiful children. Everyone says their children are beautiful, but first came Jackson and then came Calli. And right now they are 17 and 18 years old. And then as a little added bonus, I just was reunited with what my friends have termed egg babies. And that is, I have 2 biological children out there. They're twins and they're 27 years old. And I was just reunited with them. I donated my eggs 26 years ago when I was 26 years old. We've just found each other. It's fun. So now there's 5 biological children and I just became a grandmother, or I'll say Glam-Ma.
Oh my goodness. It's incredible. We're going to go into talking about the egg babies and about being a Glam-Ma. But I have to say, because I'm seeing you face to face on Zoom, you are radiant and beautiful, and no one would ever think that you are a grandma. Chrissy, you grew up in a small town in Colorado called Arvada. It's in the foothills near Boulder. Your parents got divorced when you were just about 9, and you basically grew up with a single mom. In 1985, you graduated, and a year later, you had Cody. So you were a very young mom who came from a single mom, and you were only 20 years old. I have a daughter that will be 20 like in a wink, and it just feels like, oh my goodness, what a life.
Take care of a baby.
Right. You're still just trying to figure out who you are. And you got married and then divorced immediately. You did all this without a partner, and you were able to put yourself through school in an art program for the music business in Denver. How were you able to do that?
I knew I wanted to do something important in my life. Both of my parents were blue collar workers and lived paycheck to paycheck, and neither one of them loved their jobs. When I got pregnant with Cody, I wanted that baby more than anything, and I wanted to be a mom, but there was something driving me that I knew I wanted to be more than just a mom. I wanted to do something productive and meaningful. Cody was just a tiny, tiny baby. I was literally sitting on the couch, probably breastfeeding him, and a commercial came on for the Art Institute for the music business. And I was like, that's what I want to do. That's what I'm going to do. I went to my parents. They didn't have any money for college set aside for me, sadly. So I ended up taking out a student loan, and I found a babysitter in my apartment building that I left Cody with. I didn't even have a license at the time because I had gotten into some trouble. So I took a bus downtown every single day, and I did a 2-year program, and I graduated. And I'm very proud of that achievement, that I did that on my own. And I swear to God, that loan took me 20 years to pay off.
You believed in yourself and you did something about it. I love knowing that when you were asked if you would mud wrestle while you were waitressing, you said yes, because it could bring you more money. Tell us about that time in your life.
I'm always up for an adventure. In high school, I worked at a bar. They were called 3-2 bars because they were allowed to sell beer, 3% alcohol to 18 and up. It was a really fun bar that all my friends used to go to. Downstairs, they had mud wrestling, and I was waitressing, and one of the referee, he was like, oh God, like Dirty Harry, he fit the role. And he came up to me and was like, why aren't you in the ring? I'm like, I don't know how to wrestle. I've never wrestled before. Oh my God, like, no, oh my God. And the girl seemed older to me as well, but he was like, you can make a lot of money and you're so cute and you get a lot of tips and, please, why don't you try it? And I was hemming and hawing. And I think one day someone called in sick and I ended up doing it just for fun. And I did not know what I was getting myself into. So I don't even know where I got the clothes. I'm like a pair of shorts and a t-shirt. I think the idea is to get as dirty as you can and maybe rip your t-shirt. I was sitting there and it started calling me Little Miss Chrissy. And so he's introduced these horny young girls sitting there cheering us on. And they're like, "Little Miss Chrissy, come to the ring." I'm like, "Oh my God, I don't know what I can." I like put my foot in the mud. I'm like, "Oh," I'm like, "Okay." And then I hear the crowd roaring, and I think maybe it's for me. And then they thumper, thumper, thumper. And I'm like, "What the hell is that?" And it's like another woman, a mud wrestler who was famous there, and her name was Thumper. And she was bad ass. And she came out and I was like, "Ah!" And she immediately like tossed me to the ground. Of course, she was being a little gentle with me, but I was scared shitless. I was so scared of her.
A woman named Thumper.
It was horrible. But then at the end of it, I was kind of like, well, as I'm digging mud out of my ears, I'm like, "Oh, it's kind of fun." I don't know. And the girls in the bathroom afterwards were like, "Oh, the mud is really good for your hair too." So, I did
It's a spa day.
Exactly. I continued with my role there for a little while. I did make quite a bit of money, so that was nice.
When Cody was just 2 years old, you packed up and moved to LA to pursue the music business. And you moved in with your best friend who also had a son. You became apartment managers. Here you guys are, young, beautiful women with babies.
We moved in a lot of our best friends, and we became best friends with a lot of the young people that moved in.
Very much Melrose Place. It's like a sitcom. You never landed an A&R, but you did write a lot of album and record reviews for 80s hair bands, which I love. Tell us about this time. Who are your favorite bands? And who watched Cody while you went out?
I wrote for what they were called rag magazines. I would be assigned to go to different concerts, but a lot of my time was spent on Sunset Boulevard when it was huge and just like a party, a different time when Gazzari's was there and just so much fun. I'd be assigned concert reviews there, or maybe review their new albums coming out, or even demo tapes and do interviews. I did that for a couple of years, and it was challenging with Cody because I lived with my best friend in an apartment building. We always had people around that were willing to babysit, and he always loved being with my friend Michelle and her son, and I always came home right after.
I love that. And you're able to have fun.
I did have fun. There's one cute story. I ended up interviewing a guy from a band that he became my boyfriend for 5 years. That's a whole other story. I don't remember who he opened for that night, but it was a big deal. It was at Gazzari's. His name of the band was called Wild Boys, and somebody painted them on the side of Gazzari's, and it was a really big deal. After he got off stage, we met out back when they were packing up the cars and stuff. And he's like, "We're having this huge after party." They had just gotten signed, I think. And the record company was throwing him a big party. And I'm like, "I can't, I have to go home. I have a kid." And he's like, "What?" And he literally grabbed me. He kissed me. He goes, "I love you so much for being that mom that you are. You're an amazing woman." I thought he was going to break up with me, but he loved me even more. So it was just great. It was really sweet. I loved listening to the band. Bon Jovi's my guy, and I have embarrassing photos to prove it. Obviously, I was a huge fan of Poison and Motley Crue, Rat, Cinderella, and Jason. My husband's just like, "Oh God." Please.
You stumbled into a job at Columbia Pictures and you stayed in the film business for 20 years. And you were a single mom for 12 years when you met Jason at work. And you got married in 1999. You went on to have Jackson in 2002, same year I had Amber, and Calli in 2003. You call your husband your best friend. That's how it should be if we're lucky enough. And how do you and Jason keep your relationship healthy when he's traveling for work and filming?
It's challenging, especially with having teenagers and all of the challenges that we have faced over the last 10 years. But we definitely talk every single day. We text a million times a day. He likes to FaceTime us. When possible, we do try to take time for ourselves. It's obviously been difficult lately, but we love our little trips to Mexico or Vegas and things like that. We do spend a lot of time with other couples. We keep it alive. He leaves me a lot of love notes around.
God, it's the little things. Yeah. We're going to backtrack a little bit. When you were 26 and Cody was just 6, you stumbled upon a magazine ad looking for egg donors. And it was an opportunity to help somebody, but also make some money. Tell us about that.
It's kind of trippy. 26, 27 years ago, I saw a magazine article and it was basically, can you help another family? Do you want to make money? Are you between the ages of this and this? And I was like, yes, yes, yes. So I ended up going through the process of egg donation. And I met a lovely woman who was having difficulty having some children of her own. She was 49 at the time. I really liked her. And at this particular agency, it was kind of like Tinder for back then, but you look through notebooks and see if you jive with them. I guess I chose her and she chose me and we met and it was great. So I donated my eggs, and luckily the first try, she got pregnant with twins. She had sent me a picture of them after they were born. And then that was it. She didn't want to have more contact with me. And I respected that. But she did say, if I should get pregnant and when this child or children becomes an adult, would you be interested in meeting them? And I was like, yeah, sure. You're talking about 18, 20 years from now. Yeah, sure. Of course. Cut to this past April. I guess it's been a year now. I get a Facebook message from someone. I don't recognize the name right away. And then I open it up and it's from this woman. And she says, hi, Chrissy, I just told the twins about you. Would you like to meet them? And I was like, what? Wait a minute. Back up. They were 26. Now they're 27. So that was just crazy. And my friend said, Chrissy, only you during COVID are gaining family members. You gained a grandbaby and now 2 egg babies. And so I had to laugh about that.
I love the name Egg Babies. Have you had a chance to meet them?
I did, which is really exciting because I just recently met them. I met Jackson. His name is also Jackson, which is kind of funny. I met him in February. He came and met us in Aspen and we did some skiing with him. He's an amazing snowboarder and athlete. It was great. He seemed like he really liked us. He was pretty excited to meet the family and excited to know that he had other half siblings. We got along really well. We had a really good time. We spent 3 or 4 days together. And then just a week or 2 ago, I had the opportunity to meet Katie in North Carolina, where we were traveling through. We spent the afternoon with Katie, and that was also great. It was really fun. She resembles more me than Jackson and resembles more of Cody and the other Jackson. So it was weird. She's really sweet and down to earth and really lovely. The mom did a wonderful job raising them. And it's just fun. We have a big extended family now. I want to get together with her as well and with the kids and have a big reunion of sorts one day.
I'm so happy for them and for you and for your kids that everybody's open-minded and positive about the situation. It must be very strange for you to meet adult children that are the age that you were when you had given up your eggs for donation.
I'm thrilled. Everybody was really open through this process and it was really great. My husband was super excited to meet them and the kids were, excited to meet them.
It doesn't always work out that way. So that's fantastic. I think it's what you said, that mom did a good job raising them. So there was no tension there. Cody recently had a baby girl named Arrow, which means now you have a house with a toddler coming and teenagers. Your mom was a grandma at 40 and your friends at home in Colorado, some of them are grandparents, but we don't really see that in Brentwood or in Studio City that often. You're my first friend besides Perry, who I also met through Lauren, who's a grandma. And I have to ask you, when you go out, people just assume Arrow has to be your daughter, I'm guessing.
Well, I've definitely taken Arrow on some errands and people definitely said, oh my God, how old is your baby? Sometimes I just let it go. Grandma, they're like, oh, I can't tell behind the mask.
How is that being a quote unquote Glam-Ma? How does that feel?
I definitely wanted him to have a baby. I really struggled with the name Grandma. I just still have teenagers. Like, how can I be a grandma raising kids? At the end of the day, it's whatever she wants to call me is fine. I don't care. It's great though. I love her and we're having a lot of fun together. That's
really a cute name, Glam-Ma. I like it. Jax, who grew up in your household, was just 11 when he was diagnosed with liver cancer. And up until that point, life felt very much like a fairy tale for you. And then you get this incredibly awful news. Tell us what happened the moment when everything changed.
Everything changed literally on a dime, like everything. I had seen Jackson's stomach looked a little distended. And I just kept saying, God, I should have asked the doctor about it back in April. And I didn't. And I do have this checkup coming up with his internist and maybe I'll ask her about it. But it was just a regular checkup. So we went and she was like, oh yeah, everything looks great. And as we're walking out the door, I said, oh, you know what, doctor, would you mind looking at his belly? It looks a little distended to me. And she's like, oh, Jax, hop back up here. And she looks and she feels, and she's like, you know what? I do feel like something there. Maybe the gallbladder is swollen. Why don't you go get an ultrasound? And so I made an appointment to get an ultrasound. And in Chrissy fashion, I'm trying to do too much at once. And we were leaving 2 days later to take Calli, my daughter, to an ice skating competition in Sun Valley. She's a competitive figure skater. And Jackson was going with us because my husband was out of town shooting a film. I make an appointment for the ultrasound at 8 a.m. first thing, and our flight's at 12. The technician is doing her thing. Callie's doing cartwheels in the room, and I don't know what I'm looking at. She doesn't seem too overly concerned until at one point she stands up. She's like, I need to go get the doctor. And then I'm like, oh, God. Okay. So then the doctor comes in and does all these things, takes more pictures and does all this stuff. And now I'm starting to get nervous. And then she tells Jackson to put his shirt on and wait in the lobby. And then she asks me to come to the back room, which I didn't even know existed. It's another back room. It's very dark, big metal door. She had these screens up and she said, there's a mass in your son's liver. And I was like, what? A mass? What does that mean? And she's like, come look at the image. I really did not want to look at that image, but she insisted that I look at the image because she really wanted to show me that there was a big mass and a couple other little masses in the liver. I'm like, what is a mass? And she's like, it's a nasty looking tumor. I'm like, how? What? Where did this come from? It's completely thrown for a loop. I end up calling my daughter's ice skating coach, and she gets her on the plane and she takes her to Sun Valley, cancel everything else. I call my husband. He barely even remembered I was getting an ultrasound because it wasn't a big deal. I'm like, you have to come home right now. Jackson has a tumor in his liver. And he's like, what? I'm like, you have to get on a plane, come home. We end up getting hooked up with UCLA and the liver team there. They asked us to come in the next day. They ended up doing another MRI while we were still at that clinic that morning. And then they sent those over to UCLA and we met with the doctor the next day. She called me that night and she said she wanted to meet us in the clinic in the morning and to bring my son. And she said to also bring someone that could keep my son company while she spoke to us. So I was like, oh, God. Cody went with us, of course, and kept Jackson company on the playground when we went in to speak with the doctor. And she drew the circle and all the diagrams. And she said, it's liver cancer. And like, what? And she's like, I suspect it's hepatoblastoma or hepatocellular carcinoma. It's the first time even hearing of these cancers. It's then more tests and biopsies and all of this stuff in 2 days just completely changed our lives forever.
Is that when they decided to do a liver transplant?
I had learned through research and talking to a couple of friends who are doctors that hepatoblastoma is pediatric, and it mostly occurs when infants and really young babies. They thought he was really old to be diagnosed with hepatoblastoma. So they were leaning more towards hepatocellular carcinoma, which was a much scarier diagnosis, harder to treat. It was not what we wanted to hear at all. But they thought that's what it would be. They admitted him and did a biopsy. A couple of days later, they came back and sat us down. And the doctor came in and says, it's hepatoblastoma. And I was like, it is? I'm praying for that over the other. And I'm like, so relieved. She's like, we're 90-something% sure it is. We won't know until we get in there and actually remove it. But the only way to cure hepatoblastoma is by surgery, either resection or transplant, and with chemotherapy. They didn't tell us about the liver transplant right away. They were hoping that they could resect the liver and save it. But they started doing rounds of chemotherapy, which of course were awful. And then more imaging, more chemotherapy, more imaging. The whole liver team is great. But his surgeon was Dr. L, who's like world renowned, told us that he would need a transplant. And that was another day that was just, oh my God, my husband, I've never seen him cry so much. But I kind of felt relief because I was like, okay, all right, we have a plan. This is it. We're getting a new liver. And then, of course, you start having these feelings, well, somebody else has to die in order for him to get a liver. So it's horrible, horrible. I don't know how to describe those feelings and waiting for the liver. It was hard. We did go second opinions before we put him on the list. But once they determined that he needed it, it was about 2 weeks before we got the call.
I feel so much for you because it's so frightening as a mom to see your child suffer. And you saw him lose all his hair from chemo and get very sick. Mm-hmm. And you said that Jackson had a really great attitude, which I'm sure was really helpful, but it doesn't take away from how hard it is as a parent. Right. Jackson also ended up needing to have a lung resection, which you say was even more painful than his liver transplant. So, oh my God, what he's been through.
He actually had two after the liver transplant. He had two different resections, 18 months apart.
Unbelievable. You were doing everything you possibly could to become his protector, and you continue to be his warrior mama. And that's what we do when we're mothers, and fathers. We look out for our kids. But you were taking traditional medicine and using that, like chemotherapy, but you were also making your own bone broth and using essential oils and talking to healers. You were not giving up. You were literally uncovering every stone and crossing every T, dotting every I. And rather than going the chemotherapy route the second time around, you turned to alternative medicines and looked at herbs and cannabis.
Once the cancer came back, they said it's very hard to treat. They go a different route. They use a different chemotherapy. It's even harsher than the first round. And I was told there's a chance he might not even survive chemotherapy because it's that bad and kids get very, very sick. I didn't want to hear those words. I started looking at different things and different treatment centers and cannabis and supplements and healers and everything. I asked my doctor, what if I said no to chemotherapy? Because I thought maybe I would get in trouble. The doctor said to me, I wouldn't force you unless I knew he had more of a 40% chance of living. And I was like, he doesn't think he has more of a 40% chance of living? Like, what? I had to do everything. So I did. I met a mother in the hospital who was treating her son with both THC and CBD to kill cancer cells. And the CBD also helps with nausea and things like that. I started him on all kinds of supplements like curcumin and vitamin K. I took him to several holistic doctors who gave me all kinds of different things to do, different mushrooms to try. He's such a good sport. I took him to so many different healers until I found the right healers. Some of them are really cuckoo. I had to tell you what I had to do for some of these healers. It's comical, but I did find people who I really, truly believe have a gift. I tried the best to change his diet as much as possible. We did detox with Epsom salt baths after every chemotherapy. We did do essential oils, a lot of healing power and crystals and meditation and different prayers and things like that.
What did you notice when you introduced THC and CBD?
The first time the cancer came back, his first reoccurrence, I said no to chemotherapy and I decided to give THC, cannabis, and CBD, it's a mixture, a chance. And I started giving this to Jackson right after he was diagnosed and before they said he needed to start chemotherapy. It was a lengthy process by the time we went through all, the biopsy and the paperwork. I finally agreed to a couple of different chemotherapies. Before we began, they wanted to do one more set of tests, MRI, CT, blood work. He was supposed to start chemotherapy on a Monday. I get a call from my oncologist on Friday afternoon at like 4:00. Every time I see his number come up, it scares the frick out of me. He's like, I can't believe I'm telling you this. And I'm like, what? He's like, I'm looking at all of Jackson's records, his images, everything's clear. Like, whatever you're doing, just keep doing it. I say we wait on the chemotherapy. If his tumor marker number starts to come up again, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. I don't even want to know what you're doing. Just keep doing it, because he kind of knew what I was doing. So that's what we did. It seemed to work, except 18 months later, he had another reoccurrence. And we had it removed. And then I just did the same thing all over again. And that was over 3 years ago. We're praying that it's gone forever. The first time I talked to my doctor about the cannabis, he was like, you're out of your mind, but I don't hurt anything. Now, after seeing how it helps Jackson, he's actually on the board of a therapeutic cannabis company. And he does recommend it to many of his patients.
So interesting. We're going to go back to the transplant. There was a little boy named Silas who was just 4 years old when he had brain trauma, and his liver is what saved Jackson. What happened when you found out there was a match for a transplant for Jackson?
We were so excited. It was the third time that they tried to make a match. Basically, the team has to fly to wherever a hospital is and examine the liver and deem it usable for Jackson. Is it the right size? And they can take portions of it. Was it too fatty? We had 2 false alarms. The third time they said, come to the hospital. We're almost positive this one's going to work. So just check in right now. And we told Jackson, and he was like, yay. He was so excited that he had a liver. And of course, immediately I started thinking, oh my God, someone. So as we rushed to the hospital, and we weren't even 100% sure it was happening that day. They needed to fly to Loma Linda and look and come back, and it would be a process. We're sitting in his room, just waiting. And all of a sudden the surgical team comes in. They're like, okay, let's go. And I was like, oh, so it's happening? Like, okay, wait. Oh my God, we're not mentally prepared, but okay. They rushed. It was something that you see on TV. They, roll him out, and the surgical team's walking alongside us. They take us down to the basement, to the surgical center. One of the transplant doctors says to me, you heard, right? It's a pediatric, which is ideal for another pediatric, which is very, very sad, but it is the ideal match. So they were like, yeah, a 4-year-old had trauma. I was like, oh God. So I had to know that as Jackson's going in. It was a hard pill to swallow. And as we're rolling by, I look in the hallway, there's a cooler, just like the Igloo coolers, that says Blumenthal on it. And there was the liver. It's just bizarre that they still use like normal coolers that you can buy at Target. They took him in, and it was a 6-hour procedure, and it went textbook, and it was great. He was still 11. Pretty quick recovery, considering he was in the hospital like 12 days.
No, 6 hours while he was having that transplant must have felt like a year.
Forever.
Oh my goodness. Do you want to share what happened when you wrote to the donor family?
I knew I always wanted to reach out to the family and thank them, and let them know how grateful we are. And you have to wait a year. So once a year hit, I wrote to the family and I told them a little bit about Jackson and how grateful we are. And Jackson's a musician, and we're doing this charity now, this benefit concert for pediatric cancer. And I said they were welcome to come, that we'd love to meet them if they ever were up to meeting us, and things like that. So I sent that off, and it wasn't until a year after that I received a letter back. I was shaking when I saw the envelope, because I knew it was from them. And I'm reading it, and it said, I'm so sorry I didn't get back to you. This past year has been really difficult for us. And I was thinking, this past year, well, it's been 2 years. So I was confused. My friend was sitting with me as I was reading it, and she used to be an investigative journalist, and she started Googling everything. We were not supposed to share last names, so I didn't have a last name, and I didn't know anything about the trauma. But she ends up pulling up some articles, and she's like, oh boy, I don't know if you want to read this. And I was like, oh my God. Tragically, Silas was apparently abused and died in the hands of his stepfather. It took a while for them to prove it and prosecute him and put him behind bars. And that's obviously what the family was going through the last year, the court proceedings.
Wow, there's no denying that's really heavy. You've said that Jackson might be suffering from some survivor's guilt, and that he does struggle with depression and feels like he has to do something really great with the life that he has. I could see that being a huge burden for a young person to carry. Can you tell us how Jackson's doing?
Mentally, he is struggling a lot with depression and anxiety, and it's been getting worse over the years. And he has expressed he does feel guilty. He feels like the liver should have gone to someone more deserving, because he's like, someone else would have done more things with their life. It's very debilitating for him.
Tell us about Jackson's recent obsession with the military.
It's been several years since he's been interested. He would really like to enlist, but he doesn't believe that that's possible with his medical condition. But he is very well versed in the military. He knows a lot about all branches of the military and all the weapons and how they're managed and everything about them. He wasn't into this as a younger boy or anything like this. And we don't have any military people in our family. My dad was in the Navy for a couple of years, but he was in the boiler room. So we don't have a big military presence in our family on either side. And so it was very interesting why he was so obsessed with it. And my mother-in-law was saying, what's the obsession? I'm like, I don't know. And one day I was talking to a friend of mine who's very spiritual and healing and just lovely. And we started talking about how Jackson was struggling a little bit. And she started talking about the military. And she was like, that's so interesting. Why, Chrissy? There's got to be a reason why. Why is he thinking about it? And at that very moment, for some reason, it dawned on me about his donor, Silas. I ran back in the house and I reread some of these articles. Come to find out, Silas lived on a military base with his father, who was in the military. Silas was originally buried at the military cemetery. They've since moved him due to obviously the horrible circumstances surrounding it. But I couldn't help but think in a very mystical woo-woo way that had something to do with it. I just truly believe there's something there.
You've been considering putting Jackson into a program to focus on his mental health. Where are you with that?
Last year, Jackson did do an IOP, which is an intensive outpatient program. And he learned a lot of terminology that he likes to use on me, but it didn't get to the root of his problems. So we've been talking about a residential program and he's finally agreed to it. So we're looking into them right now. It's a really good step that he's willing to go and give it a shot. He wants to get better. He does. He doesn't like to be sad. It's not a fun place to be in. The pandemic has not helped at all. Even looking at some of these facilities, they're full.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, our kids are suffering regardless. And then you add someone like Jackson, who's dealt with all of that trauma. And you mentioned he's been dealing with some intrusive OCD thoughts. It's good you're getting him help now. And I want to say that to all the listeners, the sooner we can get our kids help with their mental health, the better. I'm speaking to you, a mom who's dealt with a lot of physical health challenges for your child, but I'm sure you would agree that mental health is really important as well, and that they do go hand in hand.
They do. I almost feel like the mental health aspects have been harder for me to cope with than the physical, because there's so much more unknown. And it's not like, oh, you can go get a surgery or you can go get chemotherapy. It's so much deeper and much more complex.
What I want to talk about next is your passion about raising funds and awareness for pediatric cancer research, which is unfortunately profoundly underfunded by the government. Tell us about Chords to Cure, which I've been so lucky to attend.
Yay. Chords to Cure, this is where my heart is, was founded by a couple kids at Crossroads after Jackson was diagnosed. They wanted to find a way to give back and help the doctors helping Jackson. Jackson's a musician, and a lot of his musician friends wanted to throw together a benefit concert. And they did, and it was fabulous. And everybody came, and Chris Shiflett from the Foo Fighters came. It was really fun. I think, the kids raised about $10,000, which was fabulous. And then I got more involved. Jackson got more involved. Shortly after Jackson's diagnosis, Mafalda, who was also at Crossroads, was diagnosed with Ewing sarcoma. And she also got involved. And she's had a really, really rocky road as well. She's doing better, recovering. She's at Yale, so that's great. She was involved. And we just got more and more kids involved and more parents involved, and everyone came together. We've had 6 or 7 concerts. Our last one was virtual because of the pandemic. It was great. We've raised over $700,000. We've given everything to UCLA under Dr. Noah Fetterman's guide. He does run a research center. His foundation is run under the Johnson Cancer Center at UCLA. He's been very, very happy. Our funds have helped him get a particular cancer drug approved by the FDA. We're thrilled we took a part in that. What we're trying to do also is not just curing cancer, it's finding less invasive, less harsh treatments for these kids who undergo, chemotherapy and radiation at such young ages. They struggle with health issues for the rest of their life. There's a lot there, including mental health. Even if we can't cure it, let's find better ways to treat it.
Absolutely. You're bringing awareness. And for the listeners that don't know, Crossroads is a private K through 12 school, and it has a lot of creative students and creative energy and really great musicians. And Coldplay has been involved. There's a lot of really well-known musicians. And I got to see one of the concerts at New Road School, which is where Amanda Gorman graduated from.
Yeah. The kids, including Jackson, have played alongside Chris Martin and One Republic and Magic Giant. So he's had some great opportunities. And in fact, Chris Martin asked Jackson's band at the time, a few years back, if they would open for him at the Rose Bowl. He was so impressed with their band, and they went to go open for them at the Rose Bowl. And that was just, wow.
What a moment. I will make sure to have a link in the show notes to Chords to Cure. It's an incredible organization, and you should be so proud of what you've created. Tell us about the wolf named Jackson.
A friend of mine introduced us to this place called the Wolf Connection. It's a sanctuary for rescue wolves, but it's actually so much more than that. They bring in high-risk kids and former inmates. They pair them with these wolves, and they run these amazing programs. They're trying to be reformed, but it changes them in some really profound ways. We became involved in the Wolf Connection, and they recently got a new pup in, and his name is Jax. I believe it's inspired from Jackson, because Jax has spent a lot of time there, and he and the owner have been very close, and they talk a lot about life.
But it's so beautiful. There's nothing like the power of nature to heal. And I really do think animals have a lot to teach us. And I love that he's connected with wolves. That's very special.
It really is special. Really. We sponsored Jax this year.
Last 2 questions I ask all my guests. If you could write your younger 20-year-old self a Dear Chrissy love letter, knowing everything you've learned up to this point, what would you tell yourself?
Chrissy, you are stronger than you know, and you're going to need that strength, because life is a roller coaster. There are ups and there are downs. There are losses. There are gains. It's a wild ride. I would also have to say, as much planning as you think you're going to do, it doesn't always work out that way. So flexibility is key in succeeding and moving forward, and understanding that your path may change and your passions may change. A lot of things change, and flexibility is a very good attribute in life. Take some time for yourself and eat well, exercise, because you're going to need the energy.
It's really cliche, but you are this warrior mama. You can't take care of everyone unless you take care of yourself. And I think the reminder of flexibility is huge. If we can be more flexible and more willing to go with the flow, a lot of that anxiety and depression is going to vanish.
Yeah, because I think some people think, well, this wasn't what I planned on. We're supposed to be here by now. I was supposed to have 2 kids and be married. And then if it doesn't happen for some people, they don't know what to do. But if you go in understanding there's different paths that everybody takes, you'll enjoy life more.
Speaking of enjoying life, and besides your adorable dogs and your bunny and your crafting, what else do you do that brings you happiness? Do you have any happiness habits?
Toy Blast on my phone.
Is that a game? Okay.
That's how I relax sometimes is I have to play Toy Blast. And I think I've been playing it for 3 years now. Other than that, I do try to get out and walk with my friends. It's a good opportunity to catch up with my friends, and you kind of kill two birds with one stone. I do enjoy writing when I have the opportunity, but most of my time is obviously taking care of the kids, a family, then with Cords to Cure. I've been asked several times now if I will host another craft party.
Put me on the list.
We're going to do one.
I can bring a bunch of my kindergarten teacher supplies, so let me know. I'm so grateful that you spoke so openly to me, and am always just so blown away by moms that use their intuition, because you are such a special, giving soul. Remember, take care of yourself.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And obviously, if any of your listeners need to reach out about any of the healing tips or anything like that, they can get in touch with me.
It's very generous of you. Thank you, Chrissy. I'm so grateful.
You so much. Thank you for giving me this opportunity, and thank you for what you're doing.
Bye, Chrissy.
Bye. Thank you so much.
This is Rachel Steinman. For more information or to contact me with any questions, comments, or guest ideas, please check out rightnowrachel.com. That's right with a W. Thank you so much for listening, subscribing, and sharing, dear family. And if you found value in what you've just heard, I would love and so appreciate a great review on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Until next time, I wish you love, happiness, and good mental health.